All right.
Is that showing up, Dave?
Yep, shows up well, and I got
Great.
you on Snagit, so it's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks. So, yeah, just going to go over a little bit. It's a relatively new initiative. We really have only been going since the beginning of the year. So we're only about 8 months into this project, but already some pretty cool things have come out of it. And I'm just going to go over how it got started, what motivated it, and a little bit of what we've done so far. And then I really want to also go into what we envision as becoming down the road, and also how it can help address a little bit of what we've talked about today. So basically, what it is, it's an initiative between all four WFOs that serve the state of Tennessee, so Memphis, Huntsville, Nashville, and Morristown. And it's a collaboration effort across many service areas. So we're not just collaborating one service area, like the collaborated mesoanalysis, for example. That's just one part encompassing many service areas that then get integrated through this project, and then with hopes to provide consistent science-based services across the state. So our products are similar, our strategies are similar, and the meteorology going into it is hopefully collaborated and similar. So here's how it got started. It was after NWA last year, and we had a lot of Weather Service leadership in Huntsville for NWA, and they booked a flight out of Nashville to go back to DC. And on their way back, they hopped in our office to pay us a visit. We had Louis, we had John Murphy, John Potts, Kevin Cooley. So it's a good thing our office didn't explode or anything as that picture was being taken, or there'd be a big hole at the top of the Weather Service chain. But as a lot of offices do, when you've got this many of Weather Service leadership visiting your office, you're of course going to try to impress them and woo them with everything that you do. So we presented to them a lot of the things that we do at NWS Nashville. That included a lot of the science and training things that we do, a lot of the messaging strategies that we had been working on. And one slide in particular, and I think it was Chrissy's slide, was how we are building a resilient Middle Tennessee through partnerships and IDSS. And anyone who knows knows anything about communication, when you're communicating to somebody, it's best to speak their language. And so we threw a lot of resiliency and things like that, knowing that Louis liked that kind of wording. And well, it worked. But when he got to this slide, he asked, why are you building a resilient Middle Tennessee and not a resilient Tennessee? And he wanted to know why we weren't coordinating a lot of what we were doing with our neighboring offices to serve the entire state. So we thought, okay, good point. We'll think about it. And we saw them off on their way. Well, about a week later, we get an email, or Larry gets an email from John Murphy asking for the status of our Resilient Tennessee initiative, because he wanted to present on it at the White House, some White House Council on Science and Security, something like that. And we thought, oh, wow, he's serious about that, so I guess we should get something going. So we reached out to all of the MICs of the other 3 WFOs that serve the state of Tennessee and asked them to nominate individuals, it could be management or forecasters or anybody, who basically had a good grasp of all of the service areas and how they would intertwine into serving our mission. And so the MICs nominated some people, and through that became the Weather Resilient Tennessee. We had our first and only in-person meeting back in very early January of this year. This was at TEMA headquarters here in Nashville. And you can see it's a pretty diverse set of team members when it comes to expertise, when it comes to position. We've got 5 through 12s represented. We have lead forecasters represented. We have WCM. We have an Opal. We've got SUSE. And quite a diverse set of expertise as well. Subject matter expertise. We've got GFE strengths. We've got a lot of outreach. We've got a lot of science. So it's a really well-rounded diverse team when it comes to skill sets. And it really was a very productive meeting. And basically what we did at this meeting was everyone came to the table basically ready to present what they do well at their office, kind of like what we had done at Nashville to leadership. We all presented to each other what we do that we like. And from there, we decided, let's see what each office does and what do we want these offices to expand to the rest of Tennessee. Like, what do we think is worth that Morristown is doing that really we should be doing across the state? And we identified a number of objectives that really would serve the state well, coming from every single office. And with that, just to quickly say what the vision is, we decided the vision would be to promote weather resilience across the state of Tennessee, using that headquarters wording, through a collaborative multi-office effort that builds preparedness across a diverse set of communities and users and ensures consistency in IDSS products, messaging, scientific infusion, and partnership building. So as everyone shared their office's best practices, those last four words or last four terms is really what we focused on, is the focus areas of what we could work on collaborating. So one was IDSS products and tools. That includes the actual products that go out, such as situation reports, briefings, that kind of thing, and deciding when those will be produced. How we reach out to partnerships and vulnerable populations across the state. We shouldn't have just Huntsville focusing on south parts of Tennessee and they get a service that the rest of Tennessee is not getting, for example. How do we reach these vulnerable populations across the state? Risk communication, social science, that's obviously a big one, and how we collaborate, the way that we communicate these different risk levels and everything. And then science infusion and training. So making sure that we're all on the same page with the science that's driving these services, because none of these are worth anything if we don't have solid and cutting-edge science feeding them, and that we're adequately and consistently training all of our staffs across the state so that they are all on the same playing field. Most importantly, when you look at these four service areas, is that they really do all four go hand in hand with each other. So you need good training going into your IDSS products and tools. To reach your partnerships and vulnerable populations, you really got to master your risk communication and social science. All four of these are intertwined and work together, which basically is the whole office concept. But in this case, we're taking the whole office concept and applying it to the entire state. So at the meeting, as we focused on these objectives that we wanted to explore further, we really came up with what became 7 different sub-teams to tackle a lot of these different objectives. Everything from what we called public-facing IDSS, which is social media, graphics, that kind of thing. Partner-facing IDSS, so that would be like situation reports, briefings that go out, on-site support, making sure that that's all collaborated. What we call threshold-based IDSS, that is communicating to a specific decision-making threshold that a user might have. For example, if a river level reaches a certain level, then maybe they have a yes or no decision to make, or maybe a particular wind gust, they have to make a certain decision. So further exploring how we communicate specifically to those threshold-based decisions. GFE products and tools, that's a big one where we all have to really make sure we have the same procedures and tools with GFE, but also that we're using and applying GFE consistently across the state. Science infusion and training, and that obviously has huge implications for our meeting today, and that again is just going into the meteorology behind our IDSS. There's a whole lot there, but then also making sure that we're training on everything that we need to do. Hourly POPs came up as being important, and that's no small bite there. That's a rather large undertaking, but it's important to make sure that our hourly POPs are coordinated to drive these services. For example, how are we in Nashville supposed to provide a good timing graphic across the state of Tennessee using our POPs if they're all over the place in a complete mess? So getting those coordinated across the state. And then graphical risk depiction, meaning like the GHWO type product. Memphis, I know, does one way. I think Morristown might do another. And that is something that needs to be collaborated across the state as well. The cool thing about these sub-teams is it's not just Weather Resilient Tennessee core team members that are in these teams. We've branched out to involve other staff members at all 4 offices. So someone might not be a core team member of the Weather Resilient Tennessee team, but maybe they have a particular strength in GFE, and they also get to be included on the sub-team. So we've got 7 different teams all working on their own initiatives that then report back to the Weather Resilient Tennessee team. So what's also cool about these sub-teams is several of them have reached out to tap external expertise. So you can see here some of our external Weather Service internal partners that we've been collaborating with. Chad at Region has been involved with several of these. We've also been in communication with MDL, with the thresholds-based IDSS, the hourly POP sub-team collaborating with regional headquarters, and Ted Ryan at Fort Worth. The graphical risk depiction team is working with the AFS office at headquarters and almost becoming like a test bed eventually to test out what they've been working with. So it's not just internal based. It's important to reach out and work with external subject matter experts. And perhaps most importantly is not only are we collaborating with other people outside, but all of these sub-teams eventually start collaborating with themselves. And this is where you really get into that whole office concept. So these are the interactions that have already happened, just going 8 months into this project. We've already had all of these different sub-teams working together. For example, the thresholds-based IDSS that Dave is heading up, that team has already been working very closely with the GFE team so that the GFE team can help the thresholds-based team develop procedures for what they need, and then from there they've reported to the partner-facing IDSS to make sure that these threshold-based products are serving our partners well. So that's a whole lot of cross-sub-team interaction, which is great because that ensures a very well-rounded approach to everything that we're trying to tackle. And I'm just going to give a few examples of things that we've been working on already. Like I said, we're very early into this, so not a whole lot, but what we do have so far is pretty good. So for example, the partner-facing IDSS, they've been working on getting a standardized situation report for all 4 offices, and not only the product itself, but also coordinating when these products will be issued. And so I know that they've been working a lot together to develop maybe a matrix such as what Huntsville does, their decision-making matrix about what they produce, when, and they've also been working with Southern Region Headquarters, who I think is also developing a standardized version of this across the Weather Service. So there's some more of that external collaboration there. The Science and Training Sub-Team, which Brian is heading up, the coolest thing to come out of that, and the most significant, has been that collaborated mesoanalysis. And that sub-team actually identified collaborated mesoanalysis as a really potential important low-hanging fruit right after the Nashville tornado. We had a sub-team meeting just, gosh, I think not even a week after that tornado happened, and this was one of the important items to come out of that. And right then, of course, Region also was very interested in that concept. So with Region support and help, this became a reality, as we all know. And like we've already talked about, we've had very limited experience so far using this, just because the weather went from 100 to 0 just immediately in the summer. But there have been quite a few successes, and obviously we've already been over this quite a bit earlier today. But just throw out an example here. Tom, I remember one time you put out a really good message about a subtle surface boundary that our office had not identified, and that ended up being a source of convective initiation. And I think it was this day that I'm showing here. So here's Tom coordinating with Chrissy and Katie down in Huntsville. So again, it's not just Sue's. Here's Tom talking to a WCM and a strong science-oriented forecaster. This is an example that I referred to earlier, and I grayed out the user from Nashville because this was the individual that I told you about that held the lead meeting to complain about this, and so I didn't want to single him out, but this was the interaction that really changed his mind on it. And Mike over in Memphis was really integral, and you can see here just glancing at what he was talking about how they were focusing in on a heightened tornado threat. And this was right in the Memphis, Huntsville, Nashville tri-area. And the coolest thing about this is it went beyond just the meteorology. It went beyond just the mesoanalysis. And so looking in the chat, here we are talking about storm motion being parallel to a boundary, which could really increase a very localized tornado threat. And so once that was established, here we have this individual in Nashville saying, I'm adding this to my near-term messaging right now. And then Katie down in Huntsville and Mike both say the same thing. And I love that where Katie's saying, I love this threat messaging coordination. But here, I thought that was a great example of coordinated mesoanalysis, but it didn't stop there. All three offices coordinated and agreed to add that to their messaging. And I know we put it in a tweet and also on Facebook and in the Nibios chat, and I think the other offices did that too. And then just going even further, this is also the mesoanalysis chat room. And here I am sharing what our office had done earlier in the day, where they singled out a particular vulnerable group of users on this day, which was mobile home residents, where we had potential fast-moving tornadoes. And so here we are sharing messaging strategies in this chat room. And I don't know which office Samantha is at, I'm sorry. But he or she is saying that she really liked that messaging strategy and added it to their Facebook as well. So we're not only getting on the same page with our mesoanalysis, but through this, we're already finding ways to get consistent messaging across the state through this mesoanalysis chat room. So it's a great example, I think, of all these service areas intertwining. We've got risk communication, public IDSS, and science and mesoanalysis all working hand in hand to get a consistent service done. I thought that was a great success story. Switching gears to another service area, this was what I was talking about with the thresholds-based IDSS that Dave is leading. And like I said, this is basically finding the best way or ways to communicate the potential that a critical decision-making threshold could be reached. So one popular example of that I think we're all familiar with is like what comes out of WPC with the percent chance of reaching 4 inches or more of snow. And here's an example out of it actually worked out really well because it allowed us to experiment with some different ways of communicating to them. And the NFL draft was interesting because when Josh and I attended their planning meeting in their tabletop exercise for the draft, we learned that they had exact decisions to make based off exact weather thresholds. One of them, like I said, was the Cumberland River. Because of the stage, the NFL draft stage, for whatever reason, they decided to put it basically on the banks of the Cumberland River. So action stage started causing problems and putting equipment underwater. And we were flirting with that one day. And this was a really cool example because we called the OHRFC, who also coordinated with the Army Corps of Engineers. And it was one of the best collaboration phone calls I've ever been on. Because here the OHRFC was coordinating to me what would need to happen upstream with those dams to push that river level up to these critical thresholds. And I think 26 feet was when they had to start removing equipment. 28 feet, they had to move the draft indoors, something like that. And so we experimented with this way of communicating the threat of reaching these different levels. And using that information that the OHRFC provided me, we put that into the slides. And same thing with wind gusts. So the main stage, we put 20, 30, 40, and 60 because those were their decision-making thresholds. So 20, they had to start taking speakers down or something. 30, I forgot what it was. 40, I think they had to cancel it altogether. And 60, they would have to put people in shelter, send them to parking garages and that kind of thing. So we spoke directly to the possibility that those wind thresholds could be met. And then we added a little bit of supplementary information, such as 40 is really going to be possible in a thunderstorm. I'm sorry, possible even outside of a thunderstorm, and even more likely if it's a thunderstorm. And we played around with this 0 to 5 threat scale, just trying it out. And the feedback was immensely positive. They loved it. And in fact, the Nashville OEM requested that we do this again for CMA Fest. And then other EMs have caught word of it, and they requested this kind of product for their big IDSS event. But this is subjective. And there is meteorology. We would look at things. We looked at NBM. NBM has some probabilities. We looked at HREF. So we looked at probabilistic guidance. But where to put these slider bars was totally objective. So, well, one more thing, and Dave, I have yet to talk to you about this. I'm going to introduce you to this right now. Just one more example. This is happening now at the Nashville International Airport, where they are constructing something. I forgot what it was. It's not the terminal, but there's going to be a tower crane on the airport property, which obviously poses some pretty significant problems to flights coming in and landing if they can't see it. And so they have strict thresholds that they need to make decisions off of, and those are listed here. And so, Dave, we might want to talk about using this as a real-life example to test this out as we go further. But aviation is another potential huge one where they have exact weather thresholds to make decisions from. So anyway, going back, so how I noted that we don't have really the resources right now to populate a graphic like I showed for the draft. The thresholds team came together, came up with several weather elements that could potentially have weather making thresholds. And these colors don't necessarily mean like low, moderate, high impact. It's just the different thresholds. And we asked the GFE team to look at different models if they could come up with a way to determine the level of, or the likelihood of reaching these thresholds based off just probability, objective probability from model guidance. And they did. And here's an example. I don't know what that weather element is. But they were able to come up with a tool that we could then put in GFE. So there's some of that already cross-sub-team collaboration. And after the GFE team was able to make it possible, then the thresholds-based team went to the IDSS team and asked them, okay, now we have to make sure that this caters well to our partners. And they came up with, Dave taking the lead, of a questionnaire that will be sent out to partners across the state asking their opinions of these threshold-based products. Do they like them? If so, what's the best way to describe them? Is it numbers, descriptive, different colors? And everyone did a really great job putting this questionnaire together, and I think this is just about to go out. I don't think it's gone out just yet. But again, this cross-service area collaboration to make sure that what one team develops is providing the best possible service that we can. And the last one I'll go over as an example is the hourly POP sub-team, which has overlapped with the GFE sub-team quite a bit. And once again, this has really expanded out beyond just our Weather Resilient Tennessee team. And here we have Ted Ryan presenting to the team, which includes Chad at Region. It includes several forecasters. Here's two of them, Laurel and Katie at Huntsville, who aren't on the Weather Resilient Tennessee team, but are actively involved with this sub-team initiative. And I think you all have seen Ted present this about the PPI concept, where it's basically like the shrink stretch methodology applied to 6 or 12 hours of pop. Because as we know, NBM hourly pops are just too low, and especially the way that we calculate the overall pop for 6 or 12 hours in GFE, it doesn't work. So in this example from, 3 days ago, It becomes especially apparent. Here I've got the raw NBM pop on the left and what this sub-team has worked on to develop on the right. And looking at Crossville, for example, in the afternoon, the NBM pops stay really low. They stay below 15, actually, I think, which is not even worth a mention in our forecast in the grids. But the way that they were able to do the strength stretch, that goes up to 60%, and that's 71%. That's a significant boost to the pops, and it did storm quite a bit out there. What they did, I don't have radar verification, but what they did ended up being much, much better than the raw NBM. So this hopefully will provide a starting point so that all 4 offices have something to at least start from to get those hourly pops coordinated, and I'm really impressed with what they've done so far. This is just maybe a month or 2 of work that they've been working together, and I know a lot of this is Ted. Ted deserves an immense amount of credit for what he's done, but with our team, he was able to take his work and apply it to our team, which then provides like a test or a proving ground to test his methodology out.
Yeah, Dan, and let me add one thing. And Ted was so appreciative of this team, sub-team being able to do this because we haven't had any kind of organized convection, it seems like, in forever, other than one day. So he didn't really, he wanted feedback on the code and the process. And you know, you guys just get so many more pop-up, you know, just isolated convection than we do this time of year. So I just wanted to add that.
Awesome. Thanks for letting us know. Yeah, we have no shortage of pop-up storm. In fact, I can see some outside my window right now. And just to note, we have not yet implemented this, but I think we've all agreed, and we brought this up, so the POP sub-team presented this to the main Weather Resilient Tennessee team, and that's great because the POP sub-team, who consists of more GFE, sciencey types, brings it back to the main team, which has people like Anthony and Chrissy, and the MICs will be on once in a while, and they can provide from their point of view how useful this is to operations, and they all really liked it. So it sounds like we're well on our way to having something probably within the next few months that we can really start using to initiate hourly pops. When you think about it, that's pretty huge to be able to do that in just a few months. So like I said, it's only been 8 months that we've been going, so we don't have a whole lot yet, but I think what we have developed just a little bit, and I haven't even shown you everything, is showing a lot of promise. So as we go down the road, the objectives are going to be to get those consistent IDSS products across the state. But more than that, the content of those IDSS services are the same or at least consistent. And the messaging strategies going into those IDSS products are similar, such as identifying vulnerable users across the state. Maybe it's a mobile home, so that we're all targeting the same user with an event coming down the road. Or maybe there's an important decision-making threshold that we're aware of, and we're all speaking to that same threshold, maybe for TDOT, something like that. And we've got consistent and collaborated science going into those products. So like the POP, we're not just making something up. It's NBM, but it's got a scientifically based adjustment to it. And the meso-analysis. Our messaging is backed by thorough scientific methodology that's collaborated. And I think that's really important. And probabilistic information, that's another big one that I haven't really gone into. I know the thresholds-based kind of does that, but we've got a lot more work to do how we all communicate probabilistic information. Just a couple examples of what that might look like down the road. So I'll use a nocturnal QLCS, for example, and how these different sub-teams would work. Their work would tie in together to get one good service for a nocturnal QLCS. So when you look at the science and training, they would be focusing on making sure our forecasters are good at, across the state, we're all on the same level with recognizing a potential nocturnal QLCS, knowing the threats that come with it, collaborating it in the meso-analysis chat that we could be dealing with QLCS tornadoes coming up at nighttime. You take their work, combine it with the public IDSS, who I know, plan on developing messaging strategies. So if you do have a nocturnal tornado threat, what should our messaging strategies look like? So you can combine these two. And then the partner IDSS, we do plan on doing this. We actually have a Vortex Southeast study that just got funded that's really going to help us do this. But develop and share those strategies with the media. So it's not just our offices. We are getting those core partners involved to get these messages out. And so ideally, maybe something like this, where we have a nocturnal QLCS. We think that the number one message is that you need to leave your phone turned on, maybe like a March 2nd type thing. Not only are we saying it, but you can get news media across the whole state saying that same message so that people are hearing that message over and over, and we're really targeting vulnerable users in this case across the whole state. So I think that's what a resilient Tennessee could look like with what we're doing. Another example might be an uncertain snow forecast. So the Thresholds team is developing tools and methods for calculating and communicating these. Their work with the partner IDSS team, maybe they determine that our partners really resonate with one particular way of communicating that, like maybe 3 out of 5 is the way that they really prefer that to be messaged. And then the science and training team will come in and help train forecasters on how to interpret and come up with such probabilistic guidance. And your end result might look something like this, where all 4 offices produce a situation report communicating that threat of maybe 4 inches of snow using the exact same scale. And I'm not saying that we're going to necessarily use this method, but at least in this case, we're all using the same method. So we don't have Memphis saying 2 out of 5, Nashville is saying 26% chance, and that kind of thing. And so just to sum up, as you can see, it's really like I said, the whole office concept, but it's applied across the whole state. And you've got all these different program areas working together and working together across many offices. And it's not just us. We're bringing in external experts, and there's many more to come. I would love to get some external social scientists and other people working with us. And it really does provide, like Chad, you mentioned with TED, it provides us a great testbed opportunity because we already have 4 offices on board who have all gone through the lot process. The union stewards are on board, management's on board. And one example is what's coming out of Weather Service headquarters and the AFS office with a potential GHWO. They are very interested in using our 4 offices as a test bed to eventually test out a unified GHWO that they come up with. The meteorology going into it, it's consistent, and it's utilizing the latest meteorology and science so that we're all on one level playing field, and hopefully that playing field is way up, and it should be since we're all coordinating with each other. And we don't want to keep this just in Tennessee. This isn't just Tennessee becomes, quote, weather resilient and we leave it at that. But with what we find, I think it's a great opportunity to expand this to region or maybe even the nation to maybe motivate some other best practices in other parts of the country as well. And that's one of the main goals we have. It's not to keep it at Tennessee, but just to go, if it can work in 4 regionally diverse offices that go everywhere from the Mississippi River up into the Appalachian Mountains, then if it's good enough for those 4 offices, then it could potentially be good for many, many more. And I think that's all I have. So I'll leave it at that.